Okay, so that was the first half of the brief. Those 50 books are my recommendations for Book of the Month Club. Okay? And you would be well served if you got 49 friends to each buy one of those books and then you all had a conversation about them over time. Now, with that as a preamble, here is the other 2,000 books in the same amount of time. And these are the 26 topics that I chose to focus on. I think we need a national conversation about all of these topics. The state of the people is strong, the state of the union is not. I especially love this book on the average American. This guy, the author spent 2 years looking for the average American. And at the very end of the book, he came back to a guy who he thought was the average American and who he had decided, if this guy doesn't send me an email in the 6 months since I told him that he's the average American, he came back to the average American and he says, hey, you're the average American. And the guy said, wow, what an honor. Exactly. What an honor to be an average American. Okay? So this is really, I got goosebumps. This is one of the most exciting clusters of books around. Now, where the president is going wrong is he's not listening to America. He's trumpeting, or he's twittering, and Twitter is screwing the president, okay? The president is reaching 40% of the numbers that he could reach if Twitter were honest. Twitter is dishonest. And Zuckerberg is having a come-to-Jesus meeting with himself because he's starting to realize we could screw him out of existence in the next 90 days. He's starting to realize that Facebook could literally lose all of its value overnight. And by the way, half of the Facebook accounts are fake. Okay, which means that Zuckerberg is probably guilty of securities fraud because his valuation is based on the total number of accounts. And if half of them are fake, this is a crime. Okay? So there's some good books in here. Jim Fallows wrote with his wife Deborah, Our Towns. He flew 100,000 miles around. And what he discovered is that across America, normal people like you actually are working together and don't really give a shit about what's going on in Washington. Now that's a mistake, because what's going on in Washington is basically killing the United States of America. But across America, I think we are healthy. Where we're not healthy is in our government. Our labor union leaders have sold us out. And America's political elite has sold us out. Elites worldwide. And by the way, if you notice that Macron and people like this don't have children, I believe most world leaders are either totally bribed or totally blackmailed, and in 50% or more of the cases have participated in a satanic ritual abuse ceremony. Okay, this is just my personal opinion, but I am the hell am I? I'm a commissioner and the chief counsel for the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into Human Trafficking and Child Sex Abuse. And some of the shit that we hear is scary. And by the way, it's not just the Catholics. It's the Mormons, it's the Presbyterians, it's the Christian evangelicals. I mean, I remember one Christian evangelical that was going on and on about how great God was and sex with his wife was perfect, and then they found him in a hotel room with a gay snorting coke. Okay? So the hypocrisy and the evil across all of our so-called elites is quite extraordinary. We've destroyed families and communities. There's an excellent book that's probably not shown here called The Manufacture of Evil. When the industrial system destroyed kinship as a foundation for trust, lowering the cost of doing business, they basically destroyed the family, they destroyed the community, they destroyed all of the true costs calculations that go into having robust, sustainable local communities. I have to say, on a positive note, from Marianne Williamson on the left to Tommy Lauren on the right, we are waking up. Across America, people are waking up. And I think 9/11 was a very important part of that. I think 9/11 was what we would call cognitive dissonance on a global scale. I mean, when Donald Trump says on TV those buildings were brought down by controlled demolitions, when one of the TV studios starts announcing the fall of the building 7 minutes before it happens, you know, all of this stuff adds up. And guys like me are basically a little bit of a prod. And what's happening now is average Americans are starting to realize that all of these things are lies and that we need to move forward. People are the new superpower. Localization and hashtag unrig, holistic analytics, and true cost economics is how we get the power back, and it's how we create a prosperous world at peace that works for all. I'm just sick as I contemplate the century of evil done in our name. This first book, Gold Warriors, the author died last year, but I knew him. We captured a map of 175 buried treasure sites in the Philippines that the Japanese had put because we had cut their submarine lines from the Philippines to Japan. There are another 150 tunnels and such in Indonesia and also in Korea. One of the reasons the Koreans are coming together is because they're going to marry up cheap North Korean labor with the gold that's buried with the South Korean economy, and they're going to create a new mega economic zone in that whole area. It's going to be very interesting. Who would have thought? I broke the story on the Koreas on the 4th of March. I was called a lunatic. And I think the president or his people were a little torqued because about 2 weeks later they broke the story officially. Okay, it wasn't supposed to come out. I just happened to know a Japanese princess who was the liaison to the North Koreans, and she gave it to me. Okay, who would have thought that North Korea would unify and denuclearize? I will tell you the Middle East will denuclearize next. Okay, and there's more. We can get into ETs and neutralizing nuclears in the Q&A. Let me point out that Empire of Illusion, which is in the lower thing, it could have been in the upper, is very important because it drives home the point again that the only power that can stand up to evil is educated, mobilized voters. But you need all of them, not just 30% of them. Okay, so my mission in life is to give every one of our eligible voters, cross-checked against Social Security, because most state voting rolls are fraudulent, okay? And there are a number of people who are allowed to vote in New York and Florida by design, okay? One by absentee ballot, the other physically. Okay, we need to clean all that up. Now, I think Bill Clinton is under some form of mind control. I've heard some pretty shocking stories. And I basically think he was captured in Arkansas. And the difference between Bill Clinton and Jimmy Carter is that Carter kept his integrity and Clinton didn't. And one of these days, Jimmy Carter's going to tell the story. As I've heard it, he broke down in tears after he was elected, not realizing that he was a puppet. He put together a list of the best and the brightest for the cabinet. And then the Rockefeller guy came in and said, oh no, this is your cabinet, and handed him the list of the approved cabinet members. And that's the point at which Carter realized he was had. I've heard a similar story about Obama. Okay. Trump, hate him or not, is a completely different kettle of fish. I don't know if I said this before the meeting or during, but in Team of Vipers, Jack Welch walks out of a meeting with Trump, and he's quoted in Team of Vipers as saying they can say what they want about him. Talking to that man was like talking to a peer, not a politician. Trump being thought of by Jack Welch as a peer strikes me as an important comment to take into account the next time you want to badmouth the guy. There's something going on there that I don't understand. And yes, he talks to us as if we're in the 5th grade, because that works. Okay? Lock her up. That works. But behind that 5th grade show, there's something else going on. And I don't know what it is. I'm not privileged. I have no access, but something's going on. These lower books, the last two are mine. The False Flag Attacks and 9/11 Truth are mine. They're both free online at phi-beta-iota.net. Trigger is David Icke's book. And then all the rest. You know, this is all well documented. There are 53 known false flag operations that are absolutely incontrovertibly proven beyond a shadow of a doubt, including the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Okay? But the mainstream media is not going to touch that because they're not allowed to. So we need to get to where we can touch that. I love this book, Improper Behavior, When Misconduct is Good for Society. There comes a time when the law is wrong, and you have to confront it in a nonviolent way. It's insane to make political correctness the law of the land. It's insane to require that children at the age of 8 to 12 be taught 40 different ways of being a pervert, which is what California is doing. I mean, frankly, I went to California to give a speech. I couldn't fill my gas tank because they had one of these goddamn stupid things for ether control, and it kept shutting off because the fucking little ether thing was popping out, okay? Why anyone lives in California other than the pedophiles is beyond me. We need an active, vibrant democracy, and the surest form of public control of insane people is open dialogue. The health industry is a massive insurance fraud. We basically have pharmaceuticals that are creating drugs that make us worse, and hospitals that give us more diseases than we arrived with. At the same time, for lack of true cost economics and integrity, the US government has allowed agriculture and industry to poison our food, our air, our land, and our water. And electromagnetic pollution is a major issue. 5G is genocidal and ecocidal. And oh, by the way, it's now coming out that all these virtual reality things have been frying your children's brains. Okay, the laser electromagnetic stuff is really bad for you. Infectious disease is global to local number threat, with poverty as number one and environmental degradation. Poisoning, not climate change. Climate change and global warming are a fraud. It is the sun that determines where we're at in any given era. Okay, but poisoning of the planet and the elimination of diversity, that is a huge threat, because diversity is what allows for evolution to take place at multiple nuanced levels. Okay? Public health, in my personal view, needs to be nationalized the way police and fire services are. We need to make public health something that comes with being a citizen or whatever. The whole way we're structured, 3/4 of health, healthy living, healthy environment, natural medicine, is not what we have now. What we have right now is profit from disease, profit from death. And oh, by the way, in Florida, they've turned stripping the elderly of their assets into an art form. I mean, you go to Florida to die, they will find a way to pick you clean and make you a ward of the state and take your estate. Okay? And this is also happening in Texas and Arizona, New Mexico, and a whole bunch of other places. Basically, the way it works, and they're very selective, but they will start drugging you up, and then they will get to where you're declared incompetent, made a ward of the state. They like people who don't have relatives. And then as soon as you become a ward of the state, you're institutionalized and they take everything you own. Okay? The FBI is not doing anything about this. This is just, it's crazy. I became a Marine because I couldn't tell what 2 + 2 was for the Army test. But I think economics is really, really undervalued. Economics done right is about creating a prosperous world at peace. And these books here, I checked, all of the authors are alive, including Herman Daly, who was one of my mentors early on. Ecological Economics, Infinite Wealth by Barry Carter, Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid. The 1 billion rich have a total aggregate income of $1 trillion. The 5 billion poor have a total aggregate income of $4 trillion. But they buy different things. The rich want a sub-zero fridge for $3,000 that they have to replace every 3 years. The poor want a ceramic jar with an air gap inside of another ceramic jar that they bury in the ground and it keeps meat fresh for 5 days. Totally different economics. Okay? I mean, our next priority, and I think I address this here later, is free energy and unlimited desalinated water. But bottom line here is that free information and taking away the secrecy orders from the 6,000 patented technologies that are classified, and a few other things, are how we create a prosperous planet at peace. I seriously doubt anybody in the White House has read any one of these books. Education, huge. We're beating the creativity out of our children by the time they're in the 5th grade. They spend 18 years locked down, having to raise their hand to go to the bathroom, learning mostly useless stuff that they're then tested on with rote learning. They're not taught how to learn, how to think, or how to create. I don't have John Taylor Gatto's Weapons of Mass Instruction here. I meant to, but it does appear in a later slide. I personally believe the president needs 3 deputy vice presidents. One for global engagement that covers state, defense, and commerce. One for the Commonwealth that covers everything else, and one for education, intelligence, and research. And if I were such a vice president, the first people to have their balls cut off will be everyone working at DARPA. These are the people that are creating artificial dogs that can't get out of a bramble bush. Okay? I mean, all of this stuff, again, these are not stupid people. These aren't even immoral people. These are people trapped in a bad system where you get promoted based on doing bullshit for money. Okay? Gotta fix that. This is a very heavy-duty cluster. Chalmers, Johnson, and Bloom, I think, have died. But the first 2 books are the most important. By the way, the last bin Laden to be killed was a fake bin Laden. It was a gift from the Pakistani government to Obama for re-election. Seals died for political theatrics. McRaven knows this, which is why he turned all the files over to CIA and cut himself loose. And so the library in the last fake bin Laden's thing was also fake. That was some boy genius in covert action staff at CIA thinking about what kind of library do I want bin Laden to have. Never occurred to me as a Marine Corps officer, as a Marine Corps infantry officer, not a medical specialist, or as a spy, to question what we were doing as a republic. The entire system is geared toward blind obedience. Don't question authority. Well, we hung people at the Nuremberg trials for failing to question authority, for obeying illegal orders. An order is illegal if it's unconstitutional. And part of the problem with our flag officer corps is they only think they have 2 choices, obey or resign. They don't. They have a 3rd choice, which is say no and then tell Congress. Okay? Most of them don't have the balls to do that. Enough. Ron Paul has it absolutely right. We need a foreign policy of peace, commerce, and friendship. And I think, like him or not, that's actually what Donald Trump is trying to get to. All right, I've already spoken on this. Nuclear power is insane. One of the reasons it's insane is because most of our nuclear plants are in flooding areas. If you go to Phi Beta Iota and you look up graphic nuclear, you'll see a map of where our major nuclear plants are, and they're all in 100-year flood zones. So Fukushima times 100. All right? It makes no sense. Now, I do think free energy is coming out, and once we have free energy, that will change everything. I am anticipating free energy in a second Trump term. And if there is no second Trump term, I'm anticipating free energy after 2024. The sun matters. Climate change and global warming are fraud. How How many of you watched the drooling retard at the United Nations? Did anyone see that? Yeah. Yeah, Greta. They trotted out a mind-controlled retard who was scripted, who is being massively funded by George Soros and people like that as the little darling of climate change. Oh, you've killed us all. Bullshit. Okay? And then, sorry, I'm going to torment you Democrats. Then Donald Trump did not declare war on Iran. Oops. That was the whole idea. That was what Israel wanted at that United Nations speech. They wanted Donald Trump to declare war on Iran. Okay? He didn't do it. This is what we would call cognitive dissonance, okay? The orange baboon is not doing what you're expecting him to do. Maybe there's a good reason. All right? Donald Trump's, by the way, I've been working behind the scenes to try and not only get Rouhani to meet Trump, which I think happened. If you don't know this, Rouhani is fluent in English and has nuclear, religious, and parliamentary backgrounds, and is also totally, absolutely loyal to the supreme leader. He's not really a president. He's more like a chief of staff. The supreme leader is really the go-to guy in Iran. I think Trump has met with Rouhani, and I think Trump will make a state visit to Iran before Election Day. Okay? And since it's written into the Iranian constitution that Palestine needs to come back to the Palestinians, and since the Adelsons just threw Netanyahu under the bus by calling his wife crazy, and it looks like the Rothschilds have also made a deal and are coming home, bottom line, Zionist Israel will be uninvented in my lifetime. And Palestine will be returned to the Palestinians. Now, having said that, let me also point out that the Russians and the Chinese have spent billions on a Jewish autonomous oblast in Russia and a Jewish autonomous zone in China, connected by billions of dollars of rail and road, all leading to what could be a new port, the port of New Haifa, on North Korean land to be ceded as part of this new economic zone. This is not a story you're going to see in the New York Times or the Washington Post. But you heard it here first. I love this slide. I could spend a lifetime, a PhD on this. Evolutionary dynamics. Complex societies collapse when elite mismanagement, class conflict, social dysfunction, and a complete lack of ability to access and make sense of information. 1986, a 4-foot-high redhead named Diane Webb came up with 18 things the CIA needed to be able to do at a desktop to make sense of information, including pattern analysis, anomaly detection, on-the-fly foreign language translation, whatever. We don't have those 18 functionalities today. Trillions of dollars later, we don't have those functional capabilities. Nobody wants us to be making sense. All right? They don't want us to know what the true facts are. They don't want us to be able to say, wait a minute, if you do this, then this. Okay? So collective intelligence and the tools for collective intelligence actually become very, very important. I really think that this is one of my most positive slides. I think we're on our way somewhere in a very positive, interesting way. Okay, extraterrestrial. I was briefed. I may have met an extraterrestrial. I don't know. I'm not completely sure. But I was briefed by a NASA PhD on our base on Mars. We also have bases in Saturn. There was a time when we were doing wormhole travel. I believe this. I have no direct experience. I've read every single one of these books. I've summarized every single one of these books. And I absolutely believe there are no fewer than 26 stellar civilizations active on Earth, and that the good guys are winning. From extraterrestrial to God and religion, it doesn't get any better. They're the same thing. I'm waiting for one of you to say, how can you believe in extraterrestrials? My answer is, how can you believe in God? They're actually the same thing and the same end game. The ultimate form of life is energy with infinite love of galactic scale. Period. And Einstein said, we're all energy. This is just slow-moving energy. Okay? I'm not ready quite to believe that we're all a software program and I'm a bug, but it could be. It could be. All of these books are extraordinary. Left Hand of God. I mean, there's some guys I really admire. Pastor Chuck Baldwin, Rabbi Michael Lerner, Chaplain Jim Wallace. If I were president, I'd have a national prayer office and I'd have all three of those guys doing a morning prayer out of the White House every single day. And I would be seeking to get people back to a religion that is community-oriented, charity-oriented, not dogmatic, and certainly not in the service of a foreign power, including the Vatican. Okay, the Vatican would lose diplomatic privileges the minute I became president. I think full disclosure of 9/11 combined with full disclosure of Epstein. If you like tiny URLs, look up 9-veil-9 veils evil. I've done a full exposure on the. I'm the guy who called Epstein a Mossad operative in 2008 or whenever back then. And you all know Ghislaine Maxwell is the daughter of Robert Maxwell, who's the most famous Israeli spy in U.S. history. Okay, Ghislaine is probably the operator. Epstein is actually the employee, okay? Epstein is the fool who couldn't get a decent job, who was then sheep-dipped at Bear Stearns and then given $1 billion by Wexler, who's one of the mega groups, one of these, there are about 9 Zionist billionaires that fund subversion in the United States of America. And the Brofmans are one, and Wexler's another, okay? So all of this is known. I personally think Epstein is still alive in U.S. hands and singing like a bird. And the deep state knows this. Good. Okay, we'll come back to this in the Q&A. I need to rush through here. This is actually taking me longer because I've done what I swore I wouldn't do, which is I've been extemporaneous. This is another superb collection of books. You know, all of them are wonderful. The most important is John Lewis Gaddis, who was also in my first 50. He calls history a denied area. Most of what we're reading in the history books is absolute crap. And most of science is absolute crap. There's actually, John and I were talking about this beforehand, there's multiple levels of reality and knowledge, and basically we're at the retard level. And that's by design. That's what they want us doing. They want us doing retarded science and retarded history, which is why I want an open source agency. I will die a happy man if Donald Trump will let me create an open source agency, which is what CIA has fought me on for 30 years, because they know damn well that the day I have an open source agency, they lose 70% of their budget. Okay? Sorry about that. These are, for a while now, I've been talking about information pathologies, and it was really 9/11 that turned me on to the total disconnect between what I thought was reality and what is actually reality. And these 10 books here, each extraordinary in its own way, and what they all boil down to is our information world is fiction. Intelligence is just corrupt, ignorant, and useless. The intelligence community, again, good people trapped in a bad system, except for the 10% that are doing great evil, including running guns, drugs, cash, gold, and small children. If the president wants to really, really hurt the deep state, he can put Mike Flynn in as Director of National Intelligence, reduce the entire IC by 70%, consolidate the pieces at a revitalized CIA, create the open source agency, and close every single military base around the world. That will immediately stop most of the trafficking in drugs, guns, gold, cash, and small children. Leadership, we don't have any. We're not holding anyone accountable. Great leaders integrate ethics, knowledge, intuition, and most of all, a stark, unshakable conviction that they exist to serve their stakeholders, their citizens, not the other way around. Anybody who can call us deplorables should not be in the running for President of the United States. There are no deplorables in the United States of America. There are only citizens, residents, and illegal aliens. Poverty is huge. We have slaves in the United States of America today. That first book documents the existing slave industry, including all of the slaves on these wide Florida plantations. People that are shot if they try and run away and buried, and nobody misses them. We have more blacks in prison today than there were black slaves before the Civil War. This is by design. Our white-collar middle class and our blue-collar class have collapsed. Our working poor are less than one paycheck away from disaster. Presidential policy matters. Law enforcement is not protecting the poor. In fact, law enforcement is preying on the poor in many places. And many of the poor are uneducated to the point of being dysfunctional. Again, education is root. There are those that believe that by the standards established by the Declaration of Independence, every state today has a right to secede from the Union. If you go back and read the Declaration of Independence, everything that applied then to King George applies today to King Trump. Not making this personal, but he is in charge of an abusive, predatory, dysfunctional federal government. And the governors and legislatures of the states have sold out. Did you know that 27 states have made it a felony to criticize Israel? 27 states have made it a felony to call for a boycott of Israel. Now, do you think that all those legislators, a majority in each of 27 houses, did that because it's a good idea? Or did they do that because they're being bribed and blackmailed, possibly with pedophilia tapes? Okay? This is what we're dealing with across this country, and the real meaning of Epstein is not that we got the Epstein cell, it's that there are 49 other networks just like Epstein. One in every state of the union. That's a counterintelligence problem the FBI is complicit in allowing to occur. In fact, it's said that the CIA and the FBI are partners with the Mossad in these pedophilia tapes. I don't know myself, but I do know that we're not properly cleaning our own house. Secrecy is, of course, the absolute antithesis to democracy. It's now legal for the executive to lie to Congress and the public. Worse, this plague of secrecy has extended into the private sector. Many contracts and many of the so-called public information utilities that are used to judge stock value and so forth are now secret. Okay, so secrecy has become a way of avoiding the law and the rule of law. There are so many books here because I spend a lot of time thinking about strategy. Strategy is about ends, ways, and means. Let me just single out margin of victory. The president does bluster a great deal when he talks about the military. It's a false patriot who sings the praises of a Department of Defense that cannot win a war. Our Department of Defense is dysfunctional. It's 50% waste. We have too few aircraft. We lost 300 tanks by D-Day +3. We don't have that many tanks today. Okay? I mean, our aircraft were designed for aviation days that are warm and not humid. Our actual aviation day is hot and humid, which means they fly half as far, carry half as much, and loiter half as long. When I created the Marine Corps Intelligence Center, today a command, I did something called strategic generalizations. Average bridge loading distance is 30 tons. Why do we have a 70-ton monster that created the concept of gallons per mile? And oh, by the way, it's only useful in 6 countries where its line of sight distance range of 3,000 meters is good. Everywhere else, it's under 900 meters. There's no cross-country mobility, so why do all our military vehicles have wheels instead of tracks? Okay? What we have is this massive system for transferring wealth from the individual taxpayer to the banks through the military-industrial complex. This is just flat out wrong. And by the way, if President Trump cancels a federal income tax, I will expect all Democrats to send me $1. True cost economics. This is huge. I mean, I could spend the rest of my life doing this to good effect. The president has a sense of this. We've spent $7 trillion in the Middle East. We have nothing to show for it as a country. The banks in Israel got the $7 trillion. Okay? This is just wrong. General Smedley Butler, at the time the most decorated general in Marine Corps history, said, "War is a racket." It is. War is a racket. It costs a lot less to make peace. One of the reasons the bankers hate peace is because not only does it create more wealth, that wealth is distributed, not concentrated. Okay, so hold that concept. You create 10 times more wealth, but it's distributed, not concentrated. That's why war is a racket. Now, there's some big things that are going to be happening. I'm under a non-disclosure agreement, but let me just say that I believe that 22 million veterans are going to be part of a military political action committee within 30 to 60 days that is going to end U.S. wars overseas. This is my last cluster slide. I've been saving it for my Democratic friends, the Trump slide. There are 30 towns in Texas that are running out of water. We've been dropping the aquifers by 1 to 10 meters a year. And fracking is poisoning what's left. Okay? This is all insane. Against the top 3 threats to humanity, poverty, infectious disease, and environmental degradation, water, clean drinkable water is the key remediation factor. John was talking, and I agree with John. I want to be as bald as he is one day because it's more elegant. But I think of him as my elder brother in some ways. And he's right. We are going to see changes like you cannot begin to imagine, nor can I. And I think among them will be free energy and unlimited clean drinkable water refilling the aquifers, as well as an end to Monsanto. And now, for all of you who love the orange one, I think he is the chosen one. Not in the biblical sense, but in a sense of having been chosen by an ethereal complexity of forces to lead the Second American Revolution, one that seeks to restore the Constitution and our values. All this impeachment crap over nothing? What's really going on here is, do we want the Constitution, the family, the community, man, woman, marriage, and values back in America? Or do we want pedophilia, bestiality, transgenderism, and anything else goes? This is a cultural war. And most people don't get that. And Trump is not doing a good job of making that point. But this is a cultural war. This is a war about what kind of America do we want in the future. Do we want to be like California? Or do we want to be like, hard to pick. Let's go with North Dakota, okay? North Dakota owns its own oil and gas. It's got its own banks. Doesn't owe anybody any money, okay? That's why we destroyed Libya, because they wouldn't give France a deal, and France bribed Hillary Clinton to let us destroy Libya, so Hillary got the gold. Okay? Libya at one time had more oil, gold, and water, and was planning to basically make Africa independent and put it on a new gold standard and not have a central bank. And oh, by the way, we always make war against countries that don't have a central bank controlled by the Rothschilds. Okay? So there's some complexities here that I don't really fully understand, but this set of books, I've reviewed every single one of them. I think Kirshner is a clown prince who was born with a silver dildo up his ass. And Ivanka Trump takes bimbo to a new level. However, in fairness to the president, maybe he needed a Kushner to distract Netanyahu. I predict that Kushner will leave the White House soon to go to the campaign and never return. Unwanted Ivanka will start addressing women's groups in Kansas. And maybe, perhaps, the president will get back on track in talking to and listening to America. My bottom line on Donald Trump is that even if he were the worst asshole in the world, he's better than the other alternative. Okay? Because that was, ask me in the Q&A, that was the alternative. Okay? Under Obama, we've had more war, more false flag operations, more active shooters, and oh, by the way, the media never reports black-on-black shootings, and it doesn't report the fact that the cops have killed more people than we have. Over 4,000 people have been killed by the cops, including a woman who drew her gun when a cop was doing a peeping Tom on her house because it was reported that the door was open. What kind of bullshit is this? Okay, big picture, everything's energy, Satan is real, data and electronic spectrum are core. You can read this later. How does evil rule? It rules by controlling information, controlling perception, and controlling behavior. The good news is we're all a bunch of undisciplined assholes that can't be controlled. And I think we're about to take back the power. What can the president do about it? And I would be making the same exact presentation if Hillary Clinton were president, except I'd probably be dead, or in Guantanamo, right next to Obama. He can liberate information. We need a Web 3.0. We need a truth channel that cannot be censored. We need an open source agency. I was briefing Pat Roberts. Dave Boren wrote the foreword to my first book. Pat Roberts wrote the foreword to my second book. And so I did a return visit to Roberts' office. I was talking to the top national security advisor for Pat Roberts and pitching the open source agency to be based in Kansas, and he would get that as his retirement job. And she asked me point blank, he said, what's the mission of this agency? I said, to tell the truth about everything. She literally got up and walked out the door. Nobody in Washington wants us to tell the truth about everything. And that's what needs to change. Liberate perception. I mean, we need to do full disclosure on 9/11 and on Epstein. That will terminate the Zionist parasite in the United States of America. Then we can go after the Mormons and the Vatican. Because I'm not picking on the Zionists. They just happen to be the top of the list. Okay? All of these various organizations are doing harm to America. And I mean, pedophilia, as chief counsel, I have to emphasize that while the Catholics may be the worst at it, the Zionists, the Muslims, the Presbyterians, everybody else is into this also. It has become, adrenochrome, tortured blood, has become the drug of choice for the elite. And if you want to understand adrenochrome, just think of the Chinese boiling a dog to death to eat. What that torturing of the dog is doing is flushing the blood of the dog with adrenaline, which then changes the flavor of the meat. Just picture that being done to children on a regular basis. And then, of course, moralized behavior. You know, I'm no saint by any stretch of the imagination. Greatest president, this is the White House as I would organize it. And I'm going to go through this really quickly. Bottom line here is I think Donald Trump Jr. actually has potential in 2024, but so does Cynthia McKinney and one or two other wild cards. And I think the team in 2024 that can win is the team that brings together everybody, which is to say a coalition cabinet with a balanced budget and 7 absolute core promises, including closing every military base overseas, terminating all of the underground facilities, and terminating the federal income tax and a few other things. That's my other briefing, Steele-DD 2019. And I have some other slides that I'm just going to flash through. Oh, this one's fun. Watch for me, John McAfee, Cynthia McKinney, and Jesse Ventura to do something interesting in the next 120 days. And when we do that, it's not going to be to displace Donald Trump. It's going to be to force Donald Trump to consider #OnRig as the way in which he gets the independents, libertarians, and Greens, and #walkaways and Tea Party back into the game. I am not about Donald Trump. I'm about #OnRig for everybody. So don't get confused on that point. All right, so these graphics I'm not going to go over. This is the last one. There are 12 different things that have to happen for us to have an honest government. And this slide on the left is the one that shows you that today America is governed by a two-party tyranny elected by 30% of the voters. All right, that's it. I'm done. Now I think you get a break, and then we'll do Q&A.